Oh, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out and enjoying our pumpkin treats and Halloween festive decorations. I love Halloween, so I'm pretty excited to be doing the fall tECHO talk. So, we are here today for the tECHO talk, from secondhand to first-rate technology funding for nonprofits. Little quote to start us off from Mr. Isaac Asimov. I do not fear computers, I fear the lack of them. I think a fear that a lot of us share, especially being in the nonprofit world and not having the right equipment to do what you need to do, having the old share computer for your volunteers who come in. Yeah, let's go ahead and learn about how to fix that. So a little bit about me. I'm a giant head. My name is Jillian Garcia Weisberg, and I am a solutions advisor here at tECHO Technology Solutions. I work with many of you. I am a certified Salesforce administrator, Force.com developer. I love Salesforce, but I also really like focusing on process optimization and really making organizations more efficient. A little bit of my background prior to joining tECHO. I worked as a consultant with Heller Consulting, doing Salesforce implementations for enterprise-level nonprofits. Prior to that, I was a project coordinator in the IT department of the San Francisco Unified School District. And I also was the technology and operations manager for a local nonprofit called Active Voice. I've also worked at another nonprofit, Emerge America. I worked at Barrier Wilderness Training. So my road to technology was paved with nonprofits and government organizations. So that's really where my heart lies. And I bring this up really because in all of my roles in my previous organizations, I was in charge of finding funding for tech, making our tech work. If it plugged into a wall, somehow it was my responsibility. And I really wanted to create a presentation and a space that I would have found really valuable and helpful in my position as the technology and operations manager. So that's just some of the perspective that I'm hoping to bring to this. So let's talk a little bit about the state of nonprofit tech. How did we get here? So I really like this concept and this image. There is a perception that I'm sure all of you are all too familiar with that nonprofits should be scrappy. You should have mismatched chairs, be working on computers from 2001 because you're channeling all of your resources towards your programs because overhead is evil. And theoretically, the mark of a good nonprofit is how little of their money goes towards overhead and how much of their money goes directly towards programs. The Stanford Social Innovation Review calls this whole paradigm the nonprofit starvation cycle. So, I think it really starts sort of with the gray band. Funders have unrealistic expectations. That leads to nonprofits feeling pressure to conform, and then nonprofits neglect infrastructure and misrepresent data. So it is a toxic environment for a lot of nonprofits, but the good thing is that perceptions are shifting, which is fantastic. In 2013, GuideStar, Better Business Bureau, Wise Giving Alliance, and Charity Navigator wrote an open letter to the donors of America in a campaign to end the overhead myth, which is pretty much the false conception that financial ratios are the sole indicator of nonprofit performance. These three organizations banding together that had previously, I think, had been feeding into the starvation cycle, to have them come out in an open letter and say, hey, we really need to reevaluate how we look at valuing nonprofits is hugely important. So given this sort of shifting perspective in the overall world of nonprofits, whether it's public, individual donors, private companies, or foundations, or government, I think things are heading in a really great direction where people are starting to understand that paying staff salaries and paying for things like computers and new servers is incredibly important and just as critical to enabling nonprofits to deliver on their programs and their mission as is just very narrowly focused program or project-based funding. So that being said, what are we talking about tonight? And this is really an overview. I mean, there's definitely a couple of areas here where we could go into very, very deep dives. So tonight we'll be talking about seeking funders and grants specifically to support technology. We're talking about strategies for framing technology and programmatic and evaluation work. We'll also look at alternative sources of tech funding like major donors and tech companies. Resources for learning more will be peppered throughout, and then we'll also aggregate these resources and make them available to you after the talk. And then hopefully we'll do some share and tell. When people share their stories, they're sort of seemingly one-offs, and we can, work together to build a sharing community where we make resources and opportunities known to each other. So, looking at going after traditional foundations. Foundations are increasingly offering more support for technology, for capacity building, and for overhead. In fact, in June of this year, the Ford Foundation, which is one of the #2 foundations in the world, they have doubled their support for general overhead and capacity building from 20% to 40% for all of their giving. Ford Foundation is huge, so that percentage difference is millions and millions of dollars. And I think it's really fantastic that such a leader of the pack, sort of sterling reputation foundation is moving in this direction, because I think that other foundations will continue to follow suit. So within that sort of category, capacity building grants and capital funding can also often be used towards tech. And where can we find these foundations? There is unfortunately no, as much as I have tried and wish there was, there's no sort of special search that you can plug into Google that will pull up a handy dandy list of these are the foundations that fund technology specifically. But there are a lot of organizations that aggregate this data and make it available. So definitely check out the Foundation Center, the Network for Good Fundraising Resource Library, the Center for Nonprofit Excellence. Excellent. iWave is relatively new, and it's a private business in the space. I personally haven't had experience with it. I'd be interested to hear about it if any of you have. And then also Grant Station. So there's a really great survey that came out of the Grant Makers for Effective Organizations that really corroborates the fact that general operating support levels are on the rise. Just given the overall sort of changing funding atmosphere, it's easy to make that claim that this is happening, but it legitimately is happening. And I'm guessing, so the latest statistic here is from 2014, after overhead support remained flat for a little bit. I'm guessing 2015 is going to be a lot higher, even with just Ford saying that they're going to commit 40% of their funding dollars towards overhead and general operating support. So we just covered major foundations, kind of more traditional sense. How can we approach individual major donors and have them support our technology? So what's interesting is that a lot of times when there are funding drives, it's often for, to raise money for some kind of programmatic goal. I think that we should be emboldened and empowered to ask major donors and individual donors to support technology upgrades and projects. People are way more understanding of the power of technology and understand that you're not asking them for, blinged out iPhones for everyone. It's that you truly need the tools that are state-of-the-art, enterprise level to do what you need to do most efficiently and effectively. Seek technology gifts as gifts in kind. That, if people feel uncomfortable with giving you support for technology, if you're like, I don't know how you're going to spend this. It's also, it can be appropriate to say, hey, these are some of the things that we really need. Our server is about to die, or our printer is terrible. And people will rise to the occasion. And at least in my orgs, we have been gifted technology that we've asked for. Also, seek general fund donations. That's another strategy. If you have an annual fund or a general fund, calculate what percentage of your overall budget is technology related, and then make sure that you just account for that and incorporate that in the overall goal of your general fund. So, how do we go about asking for these things? One thing that's really important is to not lead with the technology, but lead with the why. Why do you need this technology? And to really understand what is going on with the tech in your organization so you can identify pain points and articulate what you need. So this is kind of like, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. These are sort of just like the different building blocks of tech and things that you can ask for, or pieces and components of the overall technology and software, social media ecosystem of your organization. This bottom one, the functional and secure infrastructure, is quite frankly the least sexy. Like, having a social media campaign, because it is public facing, is so much more rewarding and fun on some levels. But if your functional and secure infrastructure is neither functional nor secure, it really undermines everything else that you have built up on top of that. So it's just something to be aware of. Along those lines, thinking holistically about the technology at your organization and really understanding it and being versant in it, you should definitely develop strong strategic and tactical technology plans. So tie your technology plan into your strategic plan. It's not like we need 20 computers now because we have new staff and our computers are super old. It's, no, how is tech going to support your mission and your program? Start with the goal and then go backwards with the tactical technology plan as far as what are the individual components that you really need to put into place and the resources that you need in order to achieve those goals. It demonstrates thought and care so that when you do approach funders or major donors about your technology, they understand that you really know what you're talking about. You know what you need, you know the state of your current systems, and it's not just this like random ask. It's also really important to show that you're ready for the technology. Do you have change management plans? Do you have sort of any plans to evaluate and assess the technology that you do get to make sure that it stays healthy? A couple of resources here. Idealware is awesome. I love Idealware if none of you have heard of it. And then I'm going to diverge from my presentation for a sec just to show you this Rasmussen Foundation guide, which is over here. It pretty much is a one-stop shop for, it's a step-by-step guide to help you build your technology plan. So it's like, what is a technology plan? What is involved? Who does the work? Getting leadership buy-in. What kind of meetings should you have? It even has technology, it even has templates that you can use. So, I mean, you don't have to like 100% prescribe to this, but I know at least for me, like when I was like, oh, strategic technology plan, like, yeah, I should do that, okay. And then I was like, what is that? How do I do it? This is a really, really great starting point resource to give you the ideas of exactly how you might go about creating one of these in like a very realistic and tangible way. Presentation. Cool. So this is definitely a meaty topic, and I'm not going to get too much into it, but investigate and present the technology ROI. Figure out what you would gain by upgrading your technology, switching to a new system. What are you losing by staying what you're on now? Find a way to quantify that, which I know is challenging and seemingly unquantifiable, but it is. And really use that to provide tangible and solid metrics that demonstrate, like, for real, why you need to upgrade and why you need the funding. Cool. So, in addition to asking for technology as part of general operating costs in a grant specifically to support your technology or as part of capacity building, you can also frame your technology ask within programmatic and evaluation asks, because you need to ensure that you have the tools that you need to implement the program in the first place, evaluate it, and then collect the data and effectively analyze it. This is actually how I first got addicted to Salesforce. We had a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. We were working with the film A Place at the Table. And the organization that I was with, we were a hub organization that worked with foundations, filmmakers, and nonprofits on the ground doing the work. And we basically would strategically implant these documentaries that were funded by these big funders into organizations on the ground doing that work and give them exclusive licensing to it to host effective events based on that film. So it was a lot of constituent relationship management that I had to deal with in lots of Excel spreadsheets. Organizations all around the country. This was just one film campaign that we had going on. We would have 20 to 30 at a time. And it would be really embarrassing reaching out to an organization and being like, hey, we have this film called A Place at the Table that we think is a really great match for you, food justice organization. Would you like to work with us? And then they'd be like, hey, we worked with you on Food Inc. last year. And it's like, oops. So I built in Salesforce into this grant because we needed a way to effectively track all of these people that we are in touch with. We were also running a very rigorous evaluation on the efficacy of media to affect like emotional change and if that led to actions. And in order to do that, we needed a data collection tool. So we also built in Click Tools implementation on top of our Salesforce to collect that data. And I know for me, when I was putting this in, it felt like a little like sneaky, like I was trying to get something by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. But no, it is like 100% legitimate. In order to implement this program and evaluate it, we needed these tools. We weren't going to be able to do this on Excel spreadsheets. So just a heads up that that is definitely an option. So just a couple of tips here. It never hurts to ask. I talked to another client when I was putting this presentation together just to hear about their experiences, and they had a grant from the DC government, and they miraculously underspent it. So they went back to the DC government and said, hey, we have a really pressing need to implement this technology system. We haven't done anything with it for a while. It's really not working out. Would it be okay if we use some of these funds to upgrade our translator system? And the DC government said, sure. Which is something that I thought was really neat because I would have never thought to, once having secured a grant for a specific project, gone back to the funder and say, hey, we also have this thing that we really need, and we have these funds that we need to spend down. Let's have a conversation about this. Of course, like, use your best judgment. That's might not always be the best thing to do, but at the same time, I think it was a really compelling anecdote. So be sure to factor in training and ongoing support and understand licensing and ongoing fees when you're asking for technology. Those are definitely some hidden costs. And when you're line iteming things out, it's very easy to say, we need this many Salesforce licenses, and we need this much money for a consulting company to implement it. We also need this other tool. We also need, this laptop and these iPads to collect the data out in the fields. But then what good is all of that if your colleagues don't know how to use those tools? And then what about next year when you have all of these things, but you don't have the money basically earmarked to support the ongoing licensing fees? So just a heads up on that. Also, that every proposal, even if it is unsuccessful, is an opportunity to refine and strategize. And it's a way for you to articulate your technology ask and just, again, in a sort of iterative feedback cycle, really have your finger on the pulse of what's going on with your technology situation, why it might need, some changing or some upgrading or some support, and then really putting together a compelling reason why your organization's missions, programs, goals would be better supported by basically shoring up your technology systems. Cool. So we just covered foundations, major donors, and just sort of talked about different ways to prepare yourself for the ask, and also knowing thyself. And by thyself, I mean your organization's technology. There also are increasingly grants and in-kind gifts from Silicon Valley. So we are blessed to be in the Bay Area, where there are a lot of companies and a lot of money. So there are huge technology companies that are offering grants, like Google, Salesforce, and others. A lot of these tech companies also have ancillary foundations, like the Gates Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation, though of course that's getting sort of back to the old foundation paradigm. The companies that are private companies themselves do offer grants. Where can you find them? Contact the companies themselves. I know it sounds like a glib and annoying thing to say, but especially in the startup world, the organization stands are shifting all the time. So corporate responsibility programs are also changing a lot. So maybe there was a company who didn't have a program last year, or maybe their program was only offering like, oh, we'll send people on site to volunteer for a day. But maybe they have someone new in place because they've been growing, and actually now they are offering grants. Again, the whole it doesn't hurt to ask. This one, the corporate responsibility people at these companies, it's a little bit of a moving target, but that's why it's worth checking in and just making yourself known. SF Gives is this really great program that Amy shared with me, and it's oriented towards tech companies to really give them actionable steps about how they can plug themselves into the social responsibility space here in the Bay Area. But it has a list of companies that are a part of the SF Gives community. So that's a really great resource, is just checking out all those logos and being like, these are people I might want to talk to. It's as of yet kind of unknown how you as a nonprofit can work with SF Gives to say, hey, I know you're working with all these tech companies. I'm a nonprofit doing all this great work in San Francisco. Is there some kind of matchmaking we can do? But it is a relatively young program, and I wouldn't be surprised if something like that emerged down the line. It still is worth checking out. Sort of along those lines, I know this might be hard to see for a lot of you, but The big bar, the big dark gray bar at the end represents giving. This is a graph of giving by industry. The biggest bar here is the tech sector. And I think it's worth noting that a pretty good chunk is cash, but a huge percentage is in-kind gifts. So that might be something that you want to figure into your strategy when you're approaching tech companies or thinking about things that you may need for your organization, is that potentially doing the strategy work first to identify what your goals are and what the resources are that you need to plug in to sort of basically be the stepping stones to achieve those goals. Once you've identified what those individual stepping stones are, reaching out to the tech companies who can provide those stones to you at little or no cost. Though, of course, you could always ask them for cash as well. So, along those lines, I'm going to invite my first Sharon Tell up. Amy Brenner from Coaching Core is amazing. I'll sneak out of the way.
Is this on?
Is it?
We on?
No. Yes? It says on.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. When Jillian and Brian talked me into doing this, they're like, hey, you should talk about what you've done. And I was like, well, I can talk about what failure looks like. So I'm going to just talk for a few minutes about what I call successful failure at attempting to get support for, in our case, our platform. I work for an organization called Coaching Core. We are located in Oakland. We're 10 years old. And what we do is we provide volunteer coaches to low-income kids' sports programs. We're in the middle of a national scale-up. This year alone, we have provided 1,900 coaches to 19,000 kids across the United States. I joined Coaching Core about 4 years ago. I was hired in as the Director of Research and Evaluation. And when I walked in the door, everything was pencil and paper, and we were doing everything with Excel. And I was told, guess what? We're gonna scale. And I was like, not with pencil and paper, we're not. So when Jillian was talking a couple of minutes ago about the why, it was pretty easy to do the sell for the technology and get buy-in internally from day one, because we were not going to scale with Excel spreadsheets. And the entire organization was already feeling the pain points of trying to deal with spreadsheets and everything else that went with that. So what we did is we basically started off our build with Salesforce. And we started off with our program operations, and we've successfully built everything out from there. And my role evolved from research and evaluation to the Director of Technology and Organizational Impact, where I oversaw basically the build out of all of these different sectors. And the reason I'm talking tonight is because my role now is the Director of Foundation Relations and Organizational Impact, and I'm really into finding financial support for what we're doing. After we built out our programmatic operations and brought them onto the platform, we built it really fast and we built it really well. And our board was very engaged, very impressed, and provided a lot of financial support for what we were doing. And we applied for a Salesforce Force for Change grant. These are one of these grants that I call cosmic odds, like you're never, ever, ever gonna get it. And we didn't get it, but what we did do is we got to stage 2 of 3 of consideration. We had a really good idea that was amazing, that happened to be interesting to the foundation. And even though we didn't make it to the final round, the foundation actually recommended us to Aperio. Aperio has a program called the Silver Lining Program. And that program is designed to basically give unfettered support to whatever you want to build. It is this incredible, incredible opportunity, and the folks at Aperio are amazing. And what we discovered in that process of engaging with Aperio is that we actually weren't ready for the implementation of the idea that we came up with. We were 2 years out from that build. What we really needed was to figure out the strategy. We needed to basically nail down our technology plan for the next 5 years. So we stepped back from Apereo and actually spent the time to do the strategic planning that we needed, and got even further board buy-in and further just internal support for that. And I think we're in a much better position now to go after other foundation support, other individual donors, and we were actually successful at securing a grant from the Hewlett Foundation as a result of all of this thinking. So lots of lessons learned. I totally resonate with everything that Jillian, you've said top to bottom, because that's literally our story. And yeah, that's us.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that, because I feel like that your story just encapsulates so many of the points that we touched on tonight, and I think that it's an experience that is unique to you and to Coaching Core, but I think that probably resonates with a lot of people here. So thank you very much for sharing. And again, at the start of this, I talked about how I really would, wish that there was just like a Google search that I could like plug in and be like, tech funding, done. But it really is through building relationships, whether it's with the funder or a tech company, that other opportunities come your way. And that's why I also think it's really important for nonprofits to get together and talk to each other about the various opportunities that they've taken advantage of, heard of, etc., because there is no centralized repository of this information. And also too, though, you can get inspired by other people. Amy did a strategic plan. Like, how did you do that? Like, if I was working in a nonprofit still, I would be like hounding you after this. So I really wanted Amy to share, because I really hope that we have a lot of nonprofits that we work with here at ECHO, and I want you to build community and rely and share on the shared knowledge that you have and really be able to grow from it. Cool. So going back to Silicon Valley, there's sort of other support that you can get from tech companies. So you could get skilled volunteers through organizations like Taproot. And again, touching on what Amy was saying, just be careful about tactical versus strategic. A lot of times if you get a group of developers, they're going to come in and say, we can make you something. If you're like, I don't really know what we need made yet, or why, or like what our process is, there's going to be a little bit of a mismatch there, and you're not going to be able to take advantage of these great skilled volunteers. You can also get, well, they're not unskilled volunteers, but through corporate responsibility programs, a lot of organizations will offer, their staff to volunteer for your organization for several hours a day. So maybe they're not, the computer scientist is not, building something for you, but is instead, working in the soup kitchen. That is still useful. Of course, there's software and hardware donations. I'm sure all of you have heard of TechSoup, but if not, definitely bears mentioning. Check TechSoup out. It is awesome. There are several companies that run their donation programs through TechSoup. So like, for example, the Microsoft licensing. You can't really go to Microsoft and be like, hey, we need Office 365. That would be through TechSoup. And they have really great resources and blogs and webinars. So they're just all around awesome. There's also sort of alternative things that you can take advantage of that tech companies offer, especially if you think about what they do and how they might be able to contribute sort of that particular flavor of what they do towards helping out your nonprofit. So for example, Airbnb actually lets nonprofits use their amazing office and conference rooms for conferences. So if you need to have a big meeting or a board meeting, I know a lot of places are not cheap. So why not have it at Airbnb, which is absolutely gorgeous. So just, things to think about. There is definitely a lot of opportunity out there for funding in the very strict money sense, but there's a lot going on that is not just like straight up money that you can take advantage of to really support your organization and your goals. Cool, so thanks everyone. I hope this was helpful.